Welcome to GovCon Unfiltered, where your journey through the labyrinth of federal contracting begins. I'm Alexa Choi, your guide and host on this epic adventure. Here, we dive deep into the heart of government contracting, shedding light on the heroic tales of those who navigate its complex terrain. Our mission? To bring you closer to the action, revealing the critical steps, triumphant victories, and occasional pitfalls that our intrepid adventurers face. Your journey into the world of government contracting starts now, and we could not be happier to have you with us. Let's embark on this adventure together. Thank you for tuning in to this episode's GovCon Unfiltered. Today, our guest is Indira from RIDO Technology Consulting. I am so excited about this conversation. You have one of the most impressive backgrounds I've ever seen, and what a badass female leader. Thank you for joining us. Before we kick everything off, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, Alexa, thank you so much. I'm super honored to be here with you. I love this podcast that you're doing, and I also love what GTX is doing in the space with all the churn and change. I think it's a lifeboat for a lot of people right now. So thanks for all that hard work. A little bit about me. I am a 23-year Army veteran, signal officer, so all about IT and cyber, and came up into the military in the late 90s, really, like September 99 is when I was commissioned, and really had probably one of the most fantastic Army experiences I could have hoped to have. I mean, certainly full of challenges and crazy experiences and combat deployments, but I loved it. I really loved it. It was a tremendous education. Every job was better than the last. Every job was like the best job I'd ever had. And I really feel like privileged that I had those 23 years in service. I ended up leaving as the Chief of Budget and Legislative Affairs from the Joint Staff J6 out of the Pentagon. And so this sixth generation Oregonian who had been in Oregon her entire life and paying taxes or not, because they're so generous to veterans actually in Oregon while you're active duty. For the first time, I had to change zip codes, and it was, almost semi-permanent because my kids were going into high school. And it was really important that we kept them stabilized in their high school years. So they both were able to do all of their high school. And one of my youngest, got to do all of his middle school and high school in the same school with the same group of kids, which I think was really important. And I'm really stoked that my husband, my battle buddy, who was also an Army IT officer in the Signal Corps, he totally supported, that move. So we put down roots here in Virginia. I retired during COVID. That was fun. And then transitioned into industry and worked for a time at NetApp, which is the world's largest storage provider. Absolutely fantastic company, fantastic product. I was really familiar with it from my time in the Army because I had deployed with it. And we also taught some hours on the hardware that NetApp is known for on the storage side of the house in the schoolhouse for the U.S. Army Signal Corps. And from there, I built some really fantastic relationships with our partners. One partner in particular was Red River, was a great reseller for us on the FedCiv side. Still continues to get top partner with NetApp for the business that they do in the FedCiv side of the house. And they had asked me 3 times to come over, and really third time was a charm. And they gave me a great opportunity, so I jumped. I took it, and I could not have really been prepared for the kind of education that was going to be in the IT space. Working for a VAR is no joke. And if you're serious about what you're doing in that VAR, and you're like me, where you want to know everything, you spend a lot of time in partner portals and you're learning about things, trying to have as much, tangible information at the ready for your clients, because I didn't like selling products. I loved solving problems. And that just meant I needed to have a lot of tools in my kit bag, so that whatever the client was discussing, we knew there were many different things that we could employ to solve that. And we could do it in different ways based on timing and budget. And so I will always be grateful for that time. And then in December, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own. I have been playing with the idea really since before I got out of the military, but I just didn't have I wasn't ready for it yet. Didn't have the confidence. Honestly, a lot of people ask me wow, you did this so soon after getting out. Did you think about doing it earlier? I did. Wasn't ready to bet on myself yet, I guess, bottom line. And so I took the route of trying to learn as much about the industry I wanted to own a piece of. And I think for me, that was a great route to bring Indira and RIDO to market, because we really understand the field now. And that's it's very Sun Tzu, right? Like we just needed to go and collect as much info about everybody that we were working with. And certainly our clients aren't the enemies, but they're pretty demanding and they definitely have a vote in literally everything we do. So it was time well spent. And that's where we are today now. Alexa, RIDO opened its doors on January 2nd. Signed our first contract on January 3rd. And we're about to hire our first extra employees, which I honestly did not expect to drive any significant revenue until the end of second, maybe beginning of end of second quarter or somewhere at the top of the fourth quarter. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Right.
For a best case, worst case scenario. And certainly didn't think I would be hiring anybody until at least we had a year or maybe even 2 under our belt, simply because of, small business and things that we want to achieve in the small business world. And now, first quarter has just been a banger. It's been awesome.
Well, but that's actually good news for you. And that's actually saying something in this particular environment that's a little bit all over the place. So I feel like kudos, congratulations. And let's hop into the first question.
Yeah.
Your transition from a 23-year Army combat signal officer to a C-suite IT executive and now an entrepreneur, wow, is nothing short of remarkable. What's the most unexpected lesson that you've learned along the way?
Oh my gosh, I've learned a lot of lessons. I mean, it's kind of hard to pick like what's the most unexpected because I think when you're starting your own business, every day you remember those old school like toys, you punch them and they bounce right back up. Like if you're not willing to sort of take that level of up tempo with life as a startup or an entrepreneur running your own show, it's even harder. Every day is packed with all kinds of lessons. Some I wish I could have avoided simply by having a large staff immediately where, you can manage tasks and delegate a little bit better and then outsource things to legal, right? Or to other types of entities. Think of your taxes, think of all of the entity paperwork startup that's required for GovCon. You've got a lot of stuff that you need to do to be work ready.
Compliance.
Compliant on the federal side and the state side. But then there's this whole other bag of tricks that you need to get involved with in order to effectively team with partners, be findable, right? Be searchable.
Searchable, exactly.
In all the different places. So I would say, what the funny thing is? Like 23 years in the Army, and I certainly am like no stranger to suffering. I feel like in my 30s, I accepted that the more I would sacrificially offer a level of suffering for my troops, my family, and things that were really important in my life, like that I would benefit from the fruits of that suffering.
Right.
And the unexpected lesson is truly believing and feeling and understanding that all pain is temporary.
Right.
All pain is temporary. Well, it's mental or physical or spiritual.
Yes.
You just need something, in my opinion, for me, I needed something to be tethered to during the storms, and then something to hold on to, take me out of, some kind of, you get caught up in your own head. I just feel like, especially if you're driving a lot of change and you're not afraid to be that dissenting voice, respectfully, it's super lonely, and it's lonelier at the top. And people say that all the time, but you don't really understand it until you've achieved certain things and you look around, you're like, dang, like, a lot of the people that were with me in the earlier days, like not only are they not here, they don't want to be here with me. It's either not their game or it's just too hard. Like too much of a chasm has, been sort of created in some of those relationships and they can't relate anymore.
Right.
And the business mindset, I think for the entrepreneur, like, don't even get me started about work-life balance and stuff like that. Don't ask me that question because you won't like the answer. But that also separates you from certain things that you might have had cycles for, but now it's like, you just don't want to employ those cycles in things that aren't going to help drive the outcomes that you need for your business, your family, and then the people that you're hiring that you now have brought into your sphere of responsibility.
Right. I was hosting this very large AFCEA Nova mentor protege dinner, and we had a bunch of SCS on the stage, and I had this one Silicon Valley guy with his like NASA hoodie show up, and everybody was in a business suit, red tie, like very buttoned up. And the microphone was going down talking about work-life balance, and he took the microphone and he just leaned in front of everybody and said, "Fuck a work-life balance." You know, everybody was so buttoned up. I spit out my wine. I was like, "Oh no." But you know what?
Yeah.
Everybody was on the edge of their seat listening to what he had to say, because if you're going to spend your life, more of your life, with the people you work for and in your missions and in the things that you do every single day than you do with your own family, you better be committed to it, man.
1,000%. I am so on board with that. And for me, I would say that it's always like the work-life balance questions and the, follow your passion type questions that sort of trip me up, because the reality is, like, a lot of people don't know this about me. If you don't know me personally, you probably don't know that I am a musician and an artist. And I met my husband when we were 15. He was the drummer in a band that I sang in.
I did not know that. It's
Yeah.
awesome basketball. Love it.
And we've totally kept up with our music throughout our years. We were in multiple bands while we were in the Army as signal officers, right? And sometimes they were just like super fun, get together, garage bands with beer and snacks. Other times we get together with fellow musicians who had also kept up their craft and, their artistry. And within like one or two get-togethers, we were like, dude, we should gig. And we would start gigging, create set lists. We had tons of equipment. We have a sound recording studio in our basement even today, but we've always sort of maintained that. I think we really set the studio up when we were in Kansas. So that was like 2012 timeframe. And we would use money from the gigs that we would do to buy our gear. So it really was like a hobby that paid for itself.
Right.
And here's the thing, like, if you are working in a passionate area that you truly believe in, that can also deliver financial results that you're looking to have.
Yeah.
Dude, you don't get tired doing that stuff. Like, if anything, you have to be careful and you have to listen to the people who love you that are around you. Like, bro, you're working too hard. Like, I need you to take a break because I haven't seen you in 3 days. Like, it's not unusual. I work at home.
Right.
I work from home, right? Like, my office is wherever my clients' offices are. And I will have my husband periodically just be like, hey, it's 1 a.m. Like, you have to go to sleep. And I'll be like, what? How is that even possible? Like, literally just had dinner a few minutes ago. And it was at like 6:30, 7:30 at night. Like, it's time to turn it off. And I just get in the zone. So I chalk it up to like my undiagnosed, ADHD, OCD.
Right.
Right. But you don't see musicians ever complaining about not having work-life balance. You don't see artists, did a lot of painting. My brother-in-law is like a phenomenal painter, but he's also in contracts, for Department of Interior. And so between like our two families with our love for art and music, my sister just lives like an hour away from me up in Winchester. When we get together, it's like we make time for the things that matter to us.
Right.
That's the reality. It's like, if you're not making time for it, just be honest. It doesn't matter to you.
Right.
And you do need your family to be able to, you need to give them permission to snap that chalk line straight for you.
Yeah.
And you have to listen, you have to trust them, because clearly when it comes to your work, if you love it, you cannot be trusted.
Right.
That makes can't. Like, you'll end up not working yourself to death. I don't think that's the problem for me. I'll end up not letting people in my life that desperately want to be with me, that want to spend time with me, And so I've definitely gotten a lot better with all of this since getting out of the military. It was really hard in the Army. And I always wanted to be an officer, really. And not really, like I did when I was a little kid. My dad has this crazy story where he says he was enlisted in the Air Force. And I was sitting on his lap at home one day, and I was like 6 or 8 years old, he says. And he's like, what do you want to do, honey, when you get older? I'm like, Daddy, I want to be in the military like you. I want to be just like you. And he was like, well, I was enlisted and I was a sergeant first class, essentially, right? Air Force version of that.
Smart.
And he goes, I think if you want to go in, you should be an officer. I said, okay, I'm going to do that, Daddy. I'm going to be an officer. And he's like, well, what kind of officer do you want to be? Because you would start as a second lieutenant. I go, I want to be a second lieutenant. He goes, okay, but if you do well as second lieutenant, you could go all the way up to general. I said, okay, well, I want to be a general. He was like, what kind of general do you want to be? There's 4 levels of general. I go, I want to be the best one, Dad. The best one is what I want to do. And so he actually was like super supportive. It was like, you're just gonna have to work really hard, but you could do anything you want, And my mom was an immigrant. She's from Panama. They met in the Air Force in Panama, and then she came to the States. And, put herself through college, raised 2 kids while my dad was in the Air Force and then in the FAA, traveling all over the place. And she started her own business as a translator and interpreter. She's a linguist, speaks 6 languages. And she ran a business that grew to like 40 some odd languages, was one of the biggest interpretation and translation firms in the Pacific Northwest. And she was super successful and she did it all by herself.
Wow.
So when I talk to her about some of the stuff that I'm doing, she doesn't have necessarily an acumen for technology, and she's in her mid 70s now. And she's like, I'm just so proud of you because I know how hard it is to start a business and to run a business, especially as a woman, and you're doing it on your own, essentially. It's not like you have a backer or partners or, a slush fund to run this stuff from. And I'm also doing it without any loans. So really doing this in a smart, frugal way. And it's been phenomenal. She's like, I don't even know what you really do. And I'm just so blown away as to like how you're monetizing this in a way that's providing like crazy value. Cause she'll hear my conversations when they're visiting, if they're running around the house and I'm in the office and stuff. And that to me put so much wind in my sails because my mom and dad are totally my heroes. Totally my heroes in life, in love, in faith.
I love that.
My mom is the entrepreneur, businesswoman, boss lady, badass with a temper, a fuse that goes from like 0 to 60, like that, right?
Right.
My dad has like never been upset in my life. I've never seen him lose his temper. He's never raised his voice. He's just so even-keeled and calm. They are the perfect yin and yang.
Yeah, that sounds like a good match. We're going to get into our second question. Many veterans struggle with transition to the private sector. What's the biggest mistake you see them make, and how could they pivot towards success faster?
Yeah, I do a lot of volunteer work for Fort Block and Warriors Ethos. These are like transitioning type organizations for veterans, and they're totally free of cost. So there's, the first thing is there's tons of resources out there to help transitioning military do very well in that transition if they take the time to find it. The biggest advice based off my observations is that like, what got you here is not going to get you there. This is a whole new ball game. You have spent basically your entire adult life becoming an expert in your profession of arms.
Right.
And you're now going to compete with people who spent their entire adult life being the best of the best, the top, 1% creme de la creme of that field.
Right.
And they don't necessarily view your experience as equal to what they've done because the chits are different on the punch card, right? And so that would be the biggest thing is just to let them, really kind of just walk them through. And when I can talk to them when they still have a year or 2 out, it's very, very helpful. And I've had probably close to 100 veterans. Some were friends, some were complete strangers out of these programs that I've just volunteered to support some time to. That is amazing what they've been able to accomplish. When I get them after their first year, and they may have already been let go because they failed to like culturally assimilate into the organization that brought them in, or they just sort of missed some cues because again, the stuff that made them hyper successful in the military can be major detractors out here in industry. Like I love it too because they're like, I've been leading troops in every position I've had. I'm like, I get it. That's rad. I love that. Okay. But here's the reality. They all took an oath to do whatever the F you told them to do.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, out here, it doesn't work like that. You literally have to exercise your leadership chops and motivate and inspire people to do their best work. Otherwise, you get what you get. And you don't get upset, especially if you aren't training, coaching, and mentoring, and every 90 days, giving them some sense of an evaluation so they know where they track.
Yeah, no, I totally hear you there. And I think
so crazy. Now, foundationally, their military experience has given them literally everything and more to be the leader that many industry organizations desperately need.
Right.
We're in a time of like major chaos and churn right now. I'm kind of living for it, to be honest with you. There's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse that needs to be taken care of. I did budget for a $46 billion IT portfolio when I was at the Pentagon, and it was very difficult to get very simple things corrected because of the rice bowls and the empire building and programmatics that, quite frankly, needed to die but had too many people invested in it. I love Colin Powell. He used to say, don't be so attached to a plan that when the plan fails, you fail with it. There are a lot of programmatics that have a lot of high-ranking folks on both the congressional side of the house,
Right.
the DoD side of the house, the government civilians, and even FSIs who help create some of these programmatics and maintain them over time. And we're talking trench warfare to try and get very simple things adjusted. So I am okay with what's happening. It's tough. It's to stomach the way it's happening, but it's one of those things where if we don't get serious about what the hard stuff that needs to get done, we're doing ourselves and the American taxpayer and our national security a massive disservice. There are very few things that we can't undo, and there are very few things that we can't pass over with a waiver process, especially in the public sector.
Right.
So we need to stay calm, carry on, and do right by the American people. Remember that we all take an oath, not to a person or a political party, but to a constitution.
Right.
And do your duty.
Right.
If that is a struggle because you've now aligned with certain politics or values that are inconsistent with what is now being asked of you, just cool. That's totally fine. But you need to go.
Right.
Do the right thing.
Right.
And vote with your feet.
Right. Let's hop into the third question.
Yeah.
I really love this question a lot, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. So you've had a lot of different experiences leading different teams in the military, corporate world, as an entrepreneur. What's your leadership superpower, and how has it evolved over time?
I love the idea of us thinking about, superpowers. Because I feel like we are, it's that this is a very age-old question. Are you a human being having a supernatural experience, or are you a supernatural being having a human experience? Right. And I honestly feel like
simulation. There's that third thought too.
Yeah, right. Which is great for Hollywood. But for me, I think that we are having something much more than just the day-to-day human experience that we can process. There's something much bigger going on. I would say for me, it's been my faith, 100%. And I'm cradle-born Catholic, but I didn't fully embrace my faith until probably my 30s. I never fell away from it. I married a Catholic guy who was one of 9 and his dad was one of 13. And I always wanted to have a huge family. And he was like, no, 1 and we're done. So I got to get, my son in it. Well, without him, neither of us knew. It was I thought it was food poison, but actually we were having a baby.
I think a lot of people think that food poisoning ends up being a baby. That's common.
Yeah. So our faith is what I think the first major supernatural thing that we try to tap into to stay steady. Right. So life is so crazy, and it gets crazier if you're not tethered correctly to something that's real, that's truth. Right. The second thing, you know me pretty well, so you'll probably laugh at this, but I think is a totally unrealistic level of optimism. I have that, and I'm accused of it often. But the reality is, I own that badge of honor. I think that it's the optimism.
Vibe, y'all.
Yeah, be mindful of the energy that you're bringing into this space. Stay positive, be optimistic. It doesn't mean that bad stuff isn't going to happen or isn't happening. It just means that we have to have a mindset that there's always a route. If you're so close to the map, you can't see all the different opportunities, the different courses of action, the different routes that are available. Zoom out. Stay calm, be optimistic that we will together find a way out of this, right? A better way. And then, salute the flag and move out. Just make it happen. That's kind of my motto. And it served me and my troops really well. I know it served my family really well because, life is messy.
Yeah.
Life is messy. So
I love that because ultimately at the end of the day, we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we react to it. And if we go in there with this uncompromising positivity, I also have been accused of that same thing. And look, I'm just don't hate me because you ain't me.
That's
I know, if you have some kind of unhappiness going on, your approach and how you react to these things is going to be your attitude. And, I love hanging out with people like you, people that have that energetic positivity. It absolutely gives people life around you. And I think that's why people flock to you.
Yeah, thank you. And listen, I have bad days for sure. I have bad days too. But I think because I really try to be optimistic and find the silver lining, like find a win, right? Like make it a win-win, find a way, make it work. The world takes all kinds of people to go around. And
Yeah.
so I try to make space for all of that and not get too caught up in the messy details that can really trip us up because life is super hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. But I think if we dwell on that reality,
Right.
we're just making it harder. Like, oh my God, like serious, I'm on your team, get on my team, right? Like let's
No,
make it a little easier to carry the load together.
I
So
love it so much. It's so important. Okay, next question. So RIDO, super exciting. I love this new company of yours. Can't wait to support you forever. It's already making a lot of waves. So what's been your biggest, oh my God, wow, this is actually happening moment since you have launched your company?
I have there every day is a, oh my God, this is actually happening moment. We've only been open since January 2nd,
Right.
like we've been doing business since January 2nd. But the amount of business that we've closed in the various models with hourly, quarterly, and annual options for our clients, like it's completely insane. It's completely insane, which tells me like, listen, there's a huge need for high quality advisory and consulting support and
Oh,
it's not necessarily dependent on, let's say, for example, in the DoD space, you don't have to be a retired 3-star or 4-star general to do this
right.
well. Certainly, they have an advantage because of the amount of experience, the scope and responsibility that they've been privileged to, carry on their shoulders. But the reality is, companies today, they need great experience and they need great like doers. They need consultants and advisors that aren't afraid to really kind of tell them the truth in a helpful and respectful way with many solutions, right? Think multiple courses of action, which as officers in the Army, that's what we are raised to do. We are taught never come with less than 3 courses of action
Right.
with any problem, right? So that the boss or the client, they can pick what works best for them. And they all have to be feasible. They all have to be accessible. They all have to be suitable, right? There's a whole laundry list of training that we go through to ensure that we're not creating a bunch of crap. You might have one throwaway COA in the mix, right? And that's the last ditch, thing that you put together to make sure you had 3. But generally speaking, options are good.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
then, roll up your sleeves, get in the trenches with the client, help them out. If that means that we have to go to some business meetings with them, if that means we have to extend some relationship building techniques to them in that space, because it is different. You don't cold call a general officer or a senior SCS. All right. That I love cold calling. Love it. Okay. And I just told somebody on LinkedIn who's like complaining about cold calling that like the largest deals that Cisco and Dell ever did were initiated with a cold call.
Right.
All right. So don't underestimate the power of a cold call, but also don't shirk your responsibility to do the commensurate research required to have an effective cold call.
Right.
Right? It shouldn't really feel cold. It should be like, "Oh my gosh, how did you find my number? You're an answer to my prayers." Like, we have to
Right.
be prepared for those things. And we certainly don't wanna bother senior leaders who have FAR regulations that tie their hands from even, creating a perception of favoritism or anything of that nature. So, to talk to them first is a huge waste of time for both you, your company, and that senior individual that you think you wanna connect with.
Right, and one of the things I love about you starting your own business is, I've been asked a lot lately, how should I pivot if I'm, like, required to come into the Pentagon, but I bought a house in Front Royal? Like, that's an actual example, right?
Yeah.
And I've been given a lot of advice, I've been helping out with resumes and this and that, but at the end of the day, I'm like, "Why haven't I given the advice to start your own company?" Like, I thought about that just this morning, and I was like, "This conversation with Indira is gonna give me the fire to go back to these folks and say, 'Hey, you've spent your entire career working for the government. Why not hang out your shingle and
Yeah.
let's'" right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's scary, obviously, right? I've said it myself. Like I didn't bet on myself the second I retired, but there are certainly people who have and they've done really well.
Right, right.
Right? So it just depends like what value do you bring? Now, that's where I think having good friends in industry that you can bounce off, "Hey, here's my skill set, my experience, what I've done. How do you see me potentially monetizing this or translating some of this into valuable services that I could offer to industry?" Because the reality is like you can't never seen an officer OER, which is an evaluation report that sort of racks and stacks them on how well they did in a year, right? Or half year, or whatever, wherever they are in the cycle. And I've never seen one that doesn't say, I was personally responsible, managed a budget of 6 million, 20 million, 1 trillion, 1 billion, whatever, these crazy numbers. And it's not true.
Right.
Right? Like, you didn't manage anything, right? The requirement to spend to zero is not the same as a profit and loss responsibility of the same amount, where you have a responsibility to grow it. Okay. And most folks in the DoD don't have that experience, but it doesn't mean that they couldn't easily translate what they do know into a position that would allow them to learn how to do that very effectively. Because the other foundational leadership chops that they do have, that's severely lacking in industry. It's severely lacking. We have managers. Do not develop leaders. We just don't. Anybody who tells you differently probably perceives themselves as an excellent leader, right? And that's cool, because they might be. But the reality is that we don't spend a lot of time or treasure in the training, coaching, and mentoring of the folks that we hire. We pay big money for gold medalists. Your job is to win the gold medal. If you expected to join the team to be coached into how to winning that gold medal, you'll be let go. And it's really sad, because a lot of phenomenal talent gets let go, not because they can't do the work, but because the leadership that hired them, the management that hired them, actually doesn't know how to get them to do what needs to be done, because they've never done it themselves.
You know what? I actually love that you just said that, because I always think if you're really growing leaders, and they fail, that's not on them. That's on you.
1000%.
And I always say that to my other leaders that I work with, but it is a mindset. So it's a tough one. But let's actually wrap up today with some fire. I'm excited about the answer to this question. What's the worst career advice you've ever received, and what's the absolute best?
It's probably the same thing. Like, the best advice I ever got was also the worst advice I ever got. Isn't that crazy?
No.
I was a captain, relatively new captain. I went from an assignment in Korea to the Fort Eisenhower, then Fort Gordon, now Fort Eisenhower in Augusta, Georgia, schoolhouse. That was the signal center of excellence at the time, which is now the cyber center of excellence. And we had the first female 2-star commander while I was there. And so it was a huge deal for us. I mean, signal is not combat arms, it's combat support. So there are a lot more women in those branches than you'll find in, obviously, like combat arms organizations. But even then, it wasn't like a 10. I mean, my class was like 6 females out of, I don't know, 150 to 200. It was a lot. And we had a couple different like classes together in our group. So there wasn't a lot of ladies necessarily to talk to in my particular experience. They were there, but just because they're there doesn't mean like they're meant to be your friend. They might not be your people. You know what I mean? And you're also all competing for the same evaluations, the same opportunities. So even if you are friendly, there's kind of always, whether you want it or not, a little bit of a divide, because it's your frenemy. Like, you're trying to be a little bit better than what they're doing because you have to rack and stack above the cut line, And so I went and I saw this woman. Her name was, oh my gosh, Major General Janet Hicks. We got to tag her in this and see if she'll watch this video. So she was the first female 2-star, and then she retired while I was there. And I remember like thinking with some of the gals that were in my class, like, dude, I can't believe we have a female 2-star in the Signal Corps running this place, and like, she's retiring. It sucks. Meaning that she won't be there when we go into command as young captains, And she was pretty cool. I remember she gave a couple like OPDs, officer professional development sessions, to the schoolhouse, and they were for everybody. It wasn't separated by gender. And we were kind of like fangirling a little bit because she also had a family. And what I didn't know at the time is that I think she was married more than once. I could be wrong. When she only had one child, and her daughter was relatively young. And so for her age as a 2-star general, like, that means something if you think about the timeline. But I didn't think about that at the time. I myself didn't have children. I was in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
So I reached out to her when she retired. She became the principal of a private prep school in Augusta, Georgia, called Augusta Prep.
Okay.
And so I reached out to her and asked if I could have lunch with her. like I was seeking out her mentorship, which I highly advocate. Like everybody should do that. I still seek out mentors all the time.
Yeah.
If you don't, people who see you and resonate with you and really want to help you, they might not necessarily align to your personality and values. So I call them tour mentors. They're not really
Or mentors. I love
right.
that.
But don't be dumb. Like always accept the help because they
Right.
might be giving you a great example of what not to do or how not to behave. And so,
Exact-
take it with grace and be charitable. If they are seeing something in you and they want to help you,
Yeah.
give them a chance because it might be intended for you to learn something very particular from that person. But anyways, Janet Hicks, I go and see her at the school. We have lunch. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. She's so cool. This is what I want to try and do, I ask her for advice, like, ma'am, how would you advise me going forward? I'm just finishing the captain's course. I'm going to go into command. What do you have advice for me? And she was like, I'll be honest with you. If you were my daughter, I would tell you to quit. You should get out. Get out of the Army. Get out of the Army before you invest any more time here.
Wow.
And I was like, what? I didn't say that. I was just like dumbfounded and confused. And internally, I was like exploding because I never in a million years thought she would say that. I was expecting these awesome pearls of wisdom that were going to give me a competitive edge, right? And she was like, look, I really struggled in my personal relationships. My family suffered. It wasn't worth it. What I got out of my career and the stars, the rank that you were, she's like, the stars weren't worth it. I have one child, thank God, but I didn't have her until just, 8 years ago. And she was, in her late 40s at that point.
Yeah.
Maybe actually her early 50s. And so for her, she's like, if you were my daughter, I would tell you to get out.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And literally our lunch ended only a few moments kind of after that bomb. I really didn't get to work through it with her or process it. It was more like, wow, roger that, ma'am. Thank you for candid, advice. And I really appreciate all you've done. And, you've inspired me. And I guess I'm going to go now. And I exited stage left. But you know what? It was the best freaking advice ever because I heard that. I was in my car driving back to post and I was like, you know what? F that. I'm doing this. I'm going all the way. I'm not going to let my freaking hero tell me that I shouldn't be here. Like, I've worked so hard and I've only been in the Army for 4 years.
Right.
There's no way I want to give up the traction, the momentum that I have. I'm loving what I'm doing.
Right.
I love it. I love the camaraderie. I love the mission. I love the up tempo. I love what we're doing, what I'm learning, how I'm able to apply like all these things that are unique to my personality and how my brain works in a way that takes care of tons of people. Right. I love people. I love taking care of them. I love creating opportunities and giving them some kind of advantage just by like having their back. And the Army, you literally are set up for one opportunity after the next to do just that if you're focused on stuff other than yourself.
Right.
Right. And so I don't know if she was like literally doing a Jedi mind trick and just totally reverse psychologized me. But I went all in. I was super motivated. Actually, once I kind of processed what she said, I was angry at first thinking, like, this is why you never meet heroes, right? Ever meet your heroes in person, they will let you down. But actually, I think really quickly, just within a couple years, that experience stuck with me it hit so hard that I realized, man, what she said actually fired me up.
Yeah.
And thank God for that convo because what it did, I use that analogy, is snap that chalk line for me straight.
Oh, yeah.
Like I immediately, with that one conversation, it was barely a 30-minute lunch. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with the rest of my adult life, right?
Right.
And until I didn't want to do that anymore.
Right.
And luckily, I had such great mentors and coaches and trainers and people who had gotten out of the military at different stages, either before they made field grade, after field grade, as colonels, as general officers.
Right.
And they were all like, you do this until it's not fun anymore.
Right.
And you have to find every single piece of the suck. It has to be fun in some way. You have to enjoy waking up at 5 a.m. You have to enjoy not getting home until 12 at night. You have to enjoy sleeping in the mud, walking 12 miles in the rain with more weight on your back than you actually weigh. Like you have to embrace that and find some kind of love in it. And it can't
Right.
be like some weird toxic abusive thing. It's more of
Right.
like, I'm doing all of this for a greater purpose, a
Right.
bigger reason. And when that moment comes, I'm going to be glad I suffered right now today, because this is what's toughening me to not only do what I need to do when I need to do it, but to come back home with all my troops.
Absolutely. Well, Indira, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for listening to us on GovCom Unfiltered. We'll catch you next time for the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks to all your listeners for watching. And thanks for all you're doing for the GovCon community. I mean, you guys are killing it. And I'm really glad that I'm tied in with all you're doing. It's been super helpful to my business. And I will definitely be posting. And I hope people will use my link to go to GTX.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it'll do a lot of good for them, like it's done for RIDO.
All right. Thank you so much.